Hi, welcome to a Roboflow training movie. In this training movie, I will go a little bit deeper into blacklists and the ability to recover from failing situations in a Cumulus cataloging process. I had a previous training movie which covers error handling and how you can use or not use the ability to delete files from the drop folder when they are causing an error. Expanding on that example, here is an additional possibility to improve, save your behavior on failing cataloging processes. Imagine that you're cataloging a file, and from time to time there's a file that is in a newer version that is not supported, or that is failing for some other reason related to the filter or the asset store, the asset. In that case, you can work with the blacklist, like it happens here, but maybe you still want a file that fails to go into your system, but using a different asset handling set. An asset handling set in which maybe that filter or that asset store is disabled, so that the file gets into Cumulus and maybe is copied to the vault or to another central asset location, so it's handled properly, but it does not yet have the proper metadata extracted from the file, for instance, but at least it's inside Cumulus. An example is based on the previous example in the previous training movie. As I said, you can look it up, type in this URL or do this search, and you'll find these as one of the first results. The key thing is that at this point, this workflow is running every 30 seconds, and in the drop folder, there is a file that it is no longer processing because that file gave an error. In this case, it has to do with the fact that we use an asset handling set that only accepts JPEGs, and in this case, it's failing on that JPEG because this is a PNG. So what we can configure is there is an additional parameter which you can add, which is called Fallback Cumulus Asset Handling Set. And if I add this to my workflow, and remember, whatever changes you do on the parameters are not read by an asset handling set. So, oh, I have something strange here. What's this? I have a English keyboard here. So I say colon select asset handling set dialog. This is not mandatory that you add this, but if you add this, you get the nice selection here, so you can select, and then you can say okay, now it fails on one asset handling set, so I can use another, and you can use whatever catalog, and then in this case I'm using JPEG only, and I'm going to say okay, but if JPEG only fails, I'm going to say that I'm falling back on the standard asset handling set, or I'm falling back on something else, whatever you want. So in that case, the file will fail first, but then it will give you, it will be cataloged anyway. If I leave it like this and I stop my workflow and start it again, it will read that parameter, but at this point it will not yet process the file, because you can see that every time it loops, it says, okay, this file I'm skipping because it's in the blacklist. So you need to, of course, empty your blacklist, and then. So this is one way of making sure that files maybe are recovered, picked up anyway, you could pick an asset handling set in which you disable all filters and just keep the absolute minimum in asset stores required to catalog the file, and then you could act on it later. So if I have a show log on what has happened here, it says, okay, it failed to catalog because yes, the cataloging process says, okay, the supporting module is disactivated. In this case, we said that in this we only accept JPEGs and it's a PNG, but then it finds a fallback and it says failed, but cataloging was successful, and it adds an entry to your log file, please verify fail, and it sends an email, if email is configured, to notify, hey, there was a problem with this file, but don't worry, it's already in your catalog. And so you can act after the fact, and if we have a look and search for this this name in your Cumulus catalog, you will see that the file is nicely added at this moment in your catalog. And if you have a central asset location, etc., etc., it will have been moved to that central asset location. So this is a very gentle way of dealing with errors. Another solution could be to have Cumulus, or sorry, Roboflow just retry all the time. Now, as I mentioned before, in the previous training movie, once an error is detected on a file, if it's running on a time interval, it will retry again, and if it fails again, it will add it to the blacklist. So what you can do is you can put a workflow in front of this one. So instead of having this workflow run as a time interval, you can put another workflow in front of it, which is running as a time interval. So how we do this is you can do it very elaborately and make a workflow that has a parameter file, and in that parameter file you specify the paths of all the files you want to delete. This could be called some kind of cleanup workflow. And so what we do is we create a new workflow and we say clean up blacklists. And here we can say process newly dropped files in a drop folder. Good. So what I'm doing then is I'm saying 0. I'm doing this. We're going to actually run on a time interval, and because this in this case gets the time interval of the workflow that had a time interval, and the workflow that had a time interval will be called as next workflow. So it's not in the list yet because at this point it's still configured as a time interval, and you cannot have it in that case as a next workflow. Let's finish first this one. What we're doing is here in this workflow is I can say I want to create, let's go here and let's go back in. Where was I? No, let's do cancel and do this again. I can just say new, and this is blacklists to delete, like that. Okay. And you can have this anywhere you want, of course. This could also be, you could just be watching your param folder. That is another solution, and maybe even a better one in this case. But be very careful. Make sure if you do that, always to have a very clean file filter here. So in the file filter, we're going to say I only want and then I'm specifying a regular expression. And I'm saying I only want my delete blacklist params.txt. Okay, and what is happening is I'm going to take this for a second. Then I'm going to say here folder filter. I don't want to go into any subfolders, so I'm saying as a subfolder no subfolders. Usually in your parent folder there won't be any subfolders, but anyway, this makes sure that it is not going in there. Sorry, need to put an exclamation mark in front of it. So this way it's only doing the root and whatever, if there's something called no subfolders. Then I'm saying new, and I'm going to say files to delete, and usually in the parameters I don't use spaces. Not important, but it's something just what I do. Parameter like that, and then it's select, and then it's a export file of param file. It's a param, it's a select param file. It's this one, select param file dialog. What you get then is something like this, and then we're saying, okay, we're gonna call this like this. And then here, just a little thing to be safe about. I don't know if the minus, but the dot definitely. So I'm escaping these special characters to make sure that it doesn't see that as something else in regular expressions. So here then you have your parameter file, and now we are going to come back to this in a minute, but this is where you're going to specify the files. We also going to say new Hotfolder delete file boolean. I'm putting this here in the root, Hotfolder delete file boolean false. We're looking into our parameter folder. It's only going to look for this file, but if we don't disable the deletion of Hotfolder files, it would be deleted after processing it once, so I'm throwing it away. What I'm doing now is I'm going to say new. What I'm doing here is going to file folder, and I'm going to process text lines of a file here, and I'm saying line to process. And then here I'm going to say new, and I'm going to pick a file, store here, file folder, and I'm going to say file folder. I want to store path as file, and then I'm picking up that line to process, which is my path to the file. I'm going to say delete if exists, and this is just going to be a dummy. If you want to add some debug information, you could say new, no, right, and you could say deleting file, and then here you could say hash drop down line to process. So very simple workflow. with and this is going to delete all my blacklists. So what we're doing is we're making sure that if there's a blacklist in a workflow, that it is not called. So here I'm putting this to -2 so it can be called from external. I'm picking up this because I know there's a blacklist in that folder. Here it is. So that's what I'm going to pick up in a moment. Cancel. And I'm going hot folder. And I called this cleanup blacklists. Here it is. And I'm going to say here, well, one of the files. And you can have multiple, of course, and multiple workflows where you want to use this. So that's why I do it with a list. Where is my, here? Just doing it like this so I don't make any typos. Like that. This is one, and then you can add another and another if you have multiple workflows. The key thing is here that here in this workflow I'm going to call that workflow. I canceled it. I forgot to click save in the other one. That's why it's not appearing. Here it's still on 30 seconds. It should be on -2 workflow. So, and if I want to, so in this case, you could say I work and with the fallback. Now, just to make sure that the fallback in this case also fails, because I want it to fail so that you can see that there is actually something going on. So not yeah, and yeah, I can get right back to that. Yeah, sorry. So if I say I put here JPEG only, then if I put a PNG, it's actually trying twice with the same asset handling set, and so that is fine. And here I do a clean next. What you also could build in here is that instead of here immediately deleting the file, you could store it. You could say no, don't delete, don't delete, don't delete, just store it. Okay, and then you could say new test if file exists. Test file. Okay, and I'm going to say hot. Oh, sorry, it's dummy. It's the dummy. Test file exists. Exists. Like that. And then we're deleting the file, and then cut, paste, and you could say new, and I could say then delete file folder. Now, why would I want to do this extra step? Well, if I do it this way, I can at the same time also send an email. I could say, okay, here I can configure an email, notify blacklist, Control A, Control C, and then I could say Peter at go for flow.be, like this. And now I can say here in this section, I can say new notification send email, and I can specify here hash tag. It's not seeing the variable from the parameters, but I can do it like this, blacklist, and subject blacklist list found and deleted. You could even go as far as attach it and mail it. So you could put it in the body of the mail. Here I'm just going to say that he knows from which workflow. The fact that I'm telling whoever I'm mailing this to from which workflow it is, then this user can come to the Roboflow interface, say show log, and he will see it in that workflow automatically which files were blacklisted at some point. So this is a little bit more informative. You can even, of course, it makes maybe even more sense to put a little if test in front of it saying test if the email address is filled in. Otherwise you're trying to send an email to nobody. So we're going to say here, and this variable, test if it's not empty. Test email not empty. And the word not has no meaning, or no program meaning. It's the exclamation mark that inverts it. So then you could say cut paste. Okay, so as I said, you could construct a text body in HTML and then attach in there, specify that you want to attach the file. Of course, then you have to send the email before you delete it. Otherwise, it can't be attached anymore to the mail. But this is a very simple way. So now what happens is that this workflow here no longer works based on a time interval. It actually is called from another workflow which works on a time interval. You see, this works on 30 seconds. So what we're going to do is say start. And show log. So what happens is it has found, it says deleting the blacklist. Remember that file was present. And then it is trying to send an email. Of course, in this case, it was not able to send the email because my mail is not configured, but otherwise it would have sent the email with the subject blacklist found and deleted. So yeah, need to fix that. And here it was saying which. So automatically the user would know which workflow it was. He needs to check, he or she needs to check. Now this is running every 30 seconds, and let me have a look. And it is each time also starting the other workflow. You see? Now if we have a look at the other workflow, this guy, show log. Since it is not called, since it's not running on an interval, if you want to take a look at the log, you have to do it this way. So you have to go and take a look at the logging. So what is happening now is that this is started from the outside now. So it's the workflow is called and executed from the outside. And I noticed that clean up blacklist, read. I noticed that this workflow was gone again. Where is it? Here it is. That's the one I was looking for. Remember, I changed something, so I need to stop it. I'm going to take at this point the opportunity also to put another PNG in my drop folder. So I'm a little bit lazy. I'm going to take the same PNG. So remember, this was cataloged because we had a fallback on the standard asset handling set, which was accepting PNGs. This guy, now the workflow is configured to try twice with the same asset handling set, so it is going to fail. I'm going to set the interval of time a little bit longer, so it gives me the time to explain to you what is happening. So I'm going to start the workflow. We do a show log, and at this point there is no blacklist anymore. But because the workflow had run before, this next flow was not registered, so I have to stop all workflows and start all workflows to take. Once a workflow has run, you cannot inject a next flow anymore in there, and so you have to stop all and start all workflows. So show log. So now it has here found this file, and I'm going here, show log, and here it has tried to catalog the file, and it has tried again, and then it says appending to gray list. It actually, if the fallback is actually the same asset handling set, it doesn't retry. So sorry for mis-explaining that. So you cannot try twice with the same asset handling set. It has to be a different one if you want a retry. So here it has not done a retry. It has added it to the drop, to the blacklist. So you see saving blacklist. Why is it doing immediately saving blacklist? Because this workflow is running on demand. So that means that there is no loop in which it could retry and remember that it tried before. And this workflow has ended. So that's why it immediately saves the blacklist. No workarounds. So what happens now is that if we were to run this workflow manually, let's do that. Show log. If I run this manually, it says, okay, this file is blacklisted, so it's skipped. This is not what we want, but what happens if the normal loop, imagine this was 30 seconds or whatever time interval you want, if this one kicks in, this one is first going to delete that blacklist and is going to have it try again. So show log. And what does it say? It says, okay, I found the file. I found the blacklist. So I'm deleting it. And I'm also sending an email saying, hey, there was a blacklisted file in this workflow. If we now have a look here, show log, at the bottom, we will see again, it cataloged it and failed and appended to gray list, saw that it was terminating, so saving the blacklist. And so you can see that this is the process that can go on and on. So now you can retry this indefinitely. So this is one option. Another option could be that you make this workflow more complex and that somehow you keep in this workflow trace of how many times a certain workflow was retried. This is a more complex workflow, which is not a click thing. It's a couple of hours to write, but in this same parameter file, we could build in functionality that we have here a second column in which Roboflow keeps track of how many times it was executed. So instead of just having a single column text file where you just delete the file, you could have a counter there. And so for that counter, it could say, okay, I've tried that blacklist and That could be based on blacklist. It could also be based on the exact file that is in that blacklist, which means that we would have an additional parameter file which keeps track of the actual blacklisted files and how many times they were found in the blacklist. So then you could also selectively clean up your blacklists of the other workflows, saying, okay, that entry we're keeping in because we haven't tried it 3 times, that entry we're losing. So as you can see, many options, and this is a simple one of just cleaning out the blacklist and make sure that it always retries and retries. It also, of course, notifies the user if it fails. So each time an email is sent to the user, also that can be overruled. And normally the email is sent, and Cumulus native error is always sent to the address that you specify here in this field. This field is actually called like this. So what you could do if an error occurs and you don't want an email to be sent, all you need to do is specify that becoming empty. But be careful, then there is also no notification. Again, you could capture that inside your your launching workflow, but in this case you could say here that, okay, new, and you can call it exactly the same thing, and you could leave them empty. From this point on, this workflow will no longer send emails. There will be no emails, error emails sent by this workflow. So that's how you could overrule the repeating errors being sent for failing cataloging. Okay, so this was a pretty long training movie, but I hope you understand what it is trying to do, and you can see that there are a couple of options. A simple retry can be mapped to or you tried with a Fallback Cumulus asset handling set, just to make sure it has a different name and maybe different settings. And then you can also disable the blacklist functionality by overruling it from or deleting it from the outside. It does not work having this workflow run on a time interval and that workflow run on a time interval, because as long as it's running, the blacklist is in memory. And it works on the blacklist in memory. It saves it to disk as a backup for when it stops, but it's in memory. So whatever you would externally delete while the workflow is running, in this way, you would not see it. So that is not a solution. This is the only solution if you want to get rid of the blacklist, is that there's a cleanup workflow that cleans up the blacklist before it calls the actual workflow. So thank you for joining this training movie. I hope it is helpful, and see you in the next one.